everyone, and welcome to Jeff Bullas Show. Today I have with me Alex Levin. Alex is the co-founder and CEO of REGAL.io. He leads the go-to-market teams. Prior to REGAL.io, Alex was a product manager at Personal and Thomson Reuters, and then joined Handy, acquired by ANGI in 2018, as an early employee. At Handy and then ANGI, Alex led growth and marketing. And Alex grew up in New York and received his BA from Harvard. Alex, welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to our conversations about how to use AI agents to help people in contact centers, and we'll maybe do a chat around the general market of AI agents, which I certainly believe is the next big thing in AI, if there's ever a big thing in AI, but I think it's one of the big things, and you obviously leaned into it. So tell me a little bit about, so how you what got you to Harvard? I'm curious about that. Was that because you wanted to go to an Ivy League school? Was there a curiosity about AI? Tell us what happened years ago when you decided to go to Harvard, because it's a hard school to get into, and it's quite the badge, isn't it, to open doors for you?
Yeah, just before I start, I'm not seeing it recording on my side, so I wanted to make sure it was okay. Now I see it now. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
So I'll just answer the question.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate being here. So to go all the way back, my parents really, I think, cared about education, and I have two younger brothers, and all of us, I think, did pretty well in school, and all of us ended up going to call it top 10, top 20 schools in the country. Why Harvard specifically? I went and visited, a number of schools that I thought were interesting. And I actually nearly went to a different school, another Ivy League school, and like had finished the application, was completely ready. And like at the last second, I had been in Cambridge visiting friends and really, liked Harvard and decided to go there instead, or applied there instead. I got in and was lucky enough to go. I think to your point, one of the advantages always with those top sort of 20 schools is it is a stamp that allows you to, perhaps get started in your career a little bit more easily. Perhaps is like, something someone looks at and says, oh, well, they must be at least a little bit smart. So like that is helpful for sure. But in the end of the day, the actual experience of college is entirely what you make of it. I had,
Yeah.
friends, roommates who did nothing in college at Harvard, and got nothing out of it. And then I had other friends who, went on to become Fulbright scholars and got a lot out of it. So, you had to choose. Like Harvard was not holding your hand and saying, oh, do this next. Like some small liberal arts schools do that, but Harvard doesn't care. Like you do what you want.
Yeah.
So I think like that's one thing to think of. And the other thing to remember is Harvard, similar to other schools, has kids who are very smart, kids who are not so smart. Like, there's every sort that gets in. So the range is pretty big. And so, in the end of the day, like same point, I suppose, like if you're going to hire somebody or if you're thinking about where to go, like decide what's right for you, not just sort of what the brand name is. And ultimately, I studied liberal arts, which I highly recommend to anybody because I think it is sort of a good way of just like learning and engaging. And then when I was going to graduate, decided didn't want to go into academia. Like I studied philosophy and psychology in school, so I decided I didn't want to be a philosopher or a psychologist, and instead decided every company would be a technology company, and I had to figure out how to go and learn about building technology. And so I was lucky enough to join some early stage companies as a product manager and start learning about what it was like to work with engineers, how you worked with customers, how you decided what features to build, like all those sorts of things, which have now served me very well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned philosophy, and I've heard that if you want to get into AI, you really need to you should be studying philosophy. Because I think AI is actually asking humanity big questions. What does it mean to be human if the machine can do everything, like write a story, write poetry,
Yeah.
create a great image? I'd be interested in your thoughts on that in terms of what are the big questions that you think AI is asking of humanity, or is asking anything of humanity.
Yeah, so it's even stranger than me just studying philosophy. So I worked for a guy whose name is Steven Pinker, who
Yes.
started as a
Yep.
linguist and
Yep.
then eventually became sort of very interested in evolution because of, how did humans evolve language? How did humans evolve the ability to think? And I ultimately studied within that even a smaller area, which is sometimes called philosophy of science, or specifically, like I studied the underpinnings of consciousness. So how do you know humans are conscious, and how do you tell if a human is conscious or not, and what does it mean to be conscious? So it's
That's a
funny,
very good that's a very good
yeah,
question. How can
back
you know they're
in
conscious, right?
AI, I'd say I'm a pretty hardliner when it comes to this stuff. What I mean is, to me, like consciousness is sometimes described as is not just thinking; it is the feeling of thinking. So sometimes it's described not as smelling, but as the smelliness of something, if that distinction makes sense. So there are many computers that can smell. That doesn't make them conscious. What makes humans conscious is that they can smell and appreciate that they are smelling. Is the reflective sense that makes you conscious. So, do I think we're anywhere close to machines being conscious? No. Like, do I think there are other animals that are conscious? No. Do I think there are many animals and machines that can do things that are unbelievable, or even they're better than humans at smelling, seeing, thinking, processing? Yeah, for sure. Just the fact that they're not conscious doesn't mean that they're bad or not useful or anything like that.
Yeah,
So, and the fact that they become conscious doesn't make them automatically bad or anything like that. So, it's just that sort of transition to human species that we haven't seen any other species is very unusual and very badly understood and unlikely to be replicated in AI, at least anytime soon. Now, the really tricky part of it, if you want to get into the philosophy of it, is, well, how do you know if they're conscious or not? Right?
yeah,
There was a big philosophical experiment where you'd say, okay, pretend there's a zombie Alex, exactly like Alex in every way. And when you ask it, are you conscious? The zombie Alex responds yes.
yeah,
But you know for a fact that it's not conscious. How do you tell? Right. So if there's no way for it to self-report that it is reflexive, yeah, there's no way for you to know whether or not it's conscious. So it's kind of a moot point. So I think people should kind of forget the consciousness argument, ignore that, put it to the side, and focus on like the practicality of how this stuff can be used. I think there's really good safety and security arguments, and I think ultimately there likely will be, whether it's regulation or self-regulation, so whether it's government or self-imposed, constructs put around this so that people are not abusing it in the same way there's constructs around, other parts of the internet, other parts of technology.
Hmm.
But be sort of the only thing that slows this down. Short of that, like there's going to be an explosion of the use of this sort of more sophisticated reasoning capability in more and more places and more industries.
Yeah. Yeah, what blew me away when I sort of came across ChatGPT, which is basically the friendly interface to AI, um, in December 2022. I was just blown away, and then looking at the data, just blown away by the velocity of this technology. And I've been in technology a long time. My first sales job, a marketing job, was actually at the start of the PC revolution, and I worked for one of the largest IBM dealerships in Australia, and that was exciting times. It was the wild west of personal computers, and but AI's velocity and acceptance by people is just amazing. I think it's going to be the biggest change in human evolution that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I'm
And,
interested in your
but
thoughts.
so you can remember back to like, a point when, people went from, not having a computer work to having a computer work, right? And the enormous change. And, I remember when people went from no cell phone to cell phone, right? Or smartphone, really, and now we're all going to remember this moment. We went from no generative AI to generative AI. And yeah, it may happen even faster, but it is just amazing the things that I can do now that, my father couldn't do, whatever it was 40 years ago when he was working.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me too is that then we had the PC, then we had PCs getting connected. That was called the internet and the web. And
Yeah, so I remember that. It's funny. My first year in high school, basically there was dial-up internet, but like nothing material. And by my second year in high school, it was really materially that was it. And so like I remember when we went to like a world of the World Wide Web and like everything was available.
yeah,
And so yeah, it's the generation that's my youngest brother generation, like yeah, had basically smartphones from the beginning. And so it's a different starting point.
yeah. And I think I'm reflecting on that too is if we didn't have the internet and the web, we wouldn't have AI because AI needs large language models to really teach itself, amongst many other things. But it's like the intersection of all these technologies to produce where AI exploded, which is what happened when we gave it a friendly face in 2022 through OpenAI. So let's lean into, but I do love the philosophical discussion because I actually ended up interviewing Nick Bostrom, who wrote Deep Utopia and Superintelligence 10 years earlier. And he's a polymath out of Oxford. And that was reading his books and having a conversation with him on the podcast was just amazing. So that his ideas of what could happen from a big brain, and I felt it was really good to talk to a big brain. And sometimes I feel like my brain's not quite as big as his, but we're all
Yeah.
different. But it was I'd spent a week actually researching for him and to speak to him and talk about philosophy, about being human and being a machine. It was really fascinating. So, but anyway, I digress. But the philosophy intrigues me. It's sort of one of my curiosities amongst many others, but it's a big one. So, Alex, you did all this work. You worked for these companies, and you've leaned in tech companies. So, where did the idea for Regal.io to basically provide AI agents to help manage and run and be assistants to the humans in the contact centers? Where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so my background working was mostly as a marketer and as a product person, and I joined a big company called ANGI that owns, I'd say their best known brands are Angie's List, Home Advisor, all the big home services brands. And we thought our business model was to just move everything for buying a fence or building a new home on the internet, so you'd never have to talk to another service provider again. And we were wrong. So yes, we've brought a lot of it online, but there were still huge parts of that flow where a person-to-person conversation, a voice conversation led to much better outcomes, built trust, built understanding, better quote, better outcomes, so on and so forth.
Yep.
And so actually I ended up playing, more and more of a role with the contact center, even though it wasn't a world that I knew. And I was shocked at how far behind the contact center technology was compared to what we're using in marketing or in product. And there were fantastic ideas among the people running contact centers, but the actual software was holding them back. So ultimately, like, we tried to do a little bit, but and I even went to the current contact center companies and I said, hey, please work with us. We were a big client. We're probably a $30 million a year client. So work with us, build
Wow.
new things.
Yep.
No interest. So we ultimately started Regal because we were just so disappointed with the level of innovation in the contact center industry. And we focused at the beginning on how do we use two capabilities that the contact center doesn't have yet. One, using real-time data to drive personalization or perfection of every interaction. So instead of just saying the same thing to everyone, make sure the conversation is specific to that person. And two, how to use A/B testing in the contact center. So try version A, try version B, see what works better, which were novel concepts in the contact center. So that was the beginning, and largely it was human agents, because even though we had a lot of data, the generative AI wasn't yet good enough for us to start using it, and the natural language processing, which was like the old version of AI, definitely wasn't good enough to start actually, having it do it instead of the human. It wasn't until really about a year ago that we started seeing generative AI was good enough that, particularly in voice examples, where we could shift, instead of having the human as the tip of the spear trying to do something, have the AI agent with the script and the objections and whatever it is. So we've started making the transition. I'd say most customers now are moving, I don't know, 10 to 20% of their voice volume over to AI agents to start instead of human agents, and I think going up from there. So it's definitely not every interaction, but it's the easier ones, the more time-bounded ones, the more clear outcome ones, like, that are getting switched. So scheduling and rescheduling, asking basic questions about my account, helping with refunds or collecting payments from people, basic FAQs, basic troubleshooting. Like, those are great examples. Qualifying leads, where the AI does very well. And so now I'd say it's the same two original points, using data and doing A/B testing, but instead of humans, like, how do you have an omni agent world? And to us, that means both humans and AI agents side by side. Originally, I'd say when we started, my vision was that there would be a tool that helped the human agent. And I thought that's where it was going to go. But I've been just, like, wrong. The AI has gotten better much faster. And so now you don't need a tool to help the human, which we have, you literally can just replace the human altogether with something else. So in some industries like healthcare or like the legal industry, they still just have tools to help the human because the AI is not yet good enough to do it all. But in the contact center, the AI is good enough to do it all. So
Well,
we're very quickly going to see that transition away from human agents and towards, AI agents handling the entire interaction.
well, let me wind it back a little bit. So you got the idea. You're seeing that basically the contact center industry is ripe for disruption using technology. Okay,
Yeah.
you saw that. So where did you take the leap to cross the threshold? I'm using a Joseph Campbell hero's journey story arc here. Where did you find the courage, and how did you cross the threshold into starting Regal.io?
Yeah, my path was that I'd been in a lot of early stage startups, so I'd seen the sausage being made, so to speak, and I knew that, that I probably had the skill sets, or I thought I had the skill sets that the founders had, and ultimately, like I hadn't been in a place where I felt strongly about a business, an idea that I wanted to pursue for 10 plus years, and so I went and worked for other people, but it came to a point where I had to make a decision. Do I want to go work for somebody else yet again? Because I like early stage companies as a number two or number three. Or did I want to go and make a bet and spend time in a specific industry for the next 10 years of my life and really see where that, and ultimately decided obviously on the latter. A big part of it was my co-founder, Rebecca, and I did it at the same time. So it wasn't like I made a jump without anybody. So we made it at the same time. And we had a little bit of financial security because had just had a pretty good financial outcome from the last company that we had been at. So, doing with somebody, having a little bit of financial cushion, like helps massively. It wasn't like I was sitting there like eating ramen out of a cup. Like I could like keep a roof over my head for some period of time. And then, it's about spending time. So we spent a lot of time digging into it and really convincing ourselves that it was a good business and that we listed all the big objections and the reasons we thought it was going to fail and immediately went and tried to like convince ourselves whether it was going to succeed or fail. And when we had convinced ourselves it was a big business, that's when we went out and started raising money, hiring people, getting customers, whatever. But I think people often do it backwards. They often think that the big shiny object is being a founder, so they want to be a founder even if they're not ready. They go and raise money before they've convinced themselves that it's a thing. They get a couple customers and they go, "Oh shit, I don't really like being a founder, but I have the people's money and I don't know what to, So that's a bad situation to be in. So just do it in the right order. And I think in the end, we were lucky. Like we were right. It was a business. We got customers. We started growing. We started hiring great people. Started, raising money, and have sort of continued to progress. The fun part for me and like the maddening part is, every day you come in and you look under a rock and there's a new opportunity, and you have to be the personality type that just isn't excited by that, enthused by that, and you go, oh, okay, that's great. There's another opportunity. We're going to go and do that. And if you have that personality, yeah, it's very good to be in early stage companies. If you turn over the rock and you look again, there's another problem. Oh my God, when will it just like end? Like, don't go to early stage companies. Go to a big company where everything is solved and you just have to keep the planes running on time.
Yeah. So what are the biggest challenges you've had? You obviously bootstrapped it to a point, and then you said we need some more money to actually make it. I suppose to be number one in the industry, I suppose it would be your goal. Um, what were the biggest challenges you've had along the way? So you cross the threshold, you've got money, you can put, food on the table, roof over your head. Um, so what are the biggest challenges you've had since that start?
Yeah, I'd say the journey as a founder is always sort of an interesting one. It's a roller coaster. There's high highs and there's low lows, and you have to learn how to like, even it out and make sure you're continuing to move in the right direction. There's also with a founder the real difficult decisions between when do you listen to feedback and when do you ignore it and say, no, I know better and I'm going to keep going, right? So you go to a customer and you show them a thing and they say, I don't like it. Do you stop doing it, or do you go, well, no, that was the wrong customer, or I pitched it wrong, or whatever other reason, and I'm going to keep doing it. That combination of certainty and listening is really hard to get right, but important. And then, at some point when you're a little bit bigger, obviously, then there's other challenges, and we've had all of them, like, the wrong hiring or the wrong customer type, or building the wrong feature sometimes, or having the wrong priorities internally. And I'd love to say that, like, as a founder, that we've, me and my co-founder have gotten it all right, but we certainly haven't. And I think it's the speed at which you're able to recognize that you made a mistake, and the ability to acknowledge that it was, our fault, and ultimately nobody else's. Like, when something bad happens, we're the ones that caused it. And then the ability to quickly have sort of change management internally where you can move into the right direction. And the people who are able to fail fast and more often and are willing to, like, get smacked in the face and, like, keep on doing it again are the ones who are great founders, right? The ones who are too afraid to try it, or don't want to move it even though they know it's not quite working right. Yeah, that's where it doesn't work as well.
Mm. So the other question I have around that is, you come up with the idea and then you design a product, and of course there's the lovely acronym MVP, minimal viable product.
Yeah.
And so did you build one of those? In other words, you created what you thought were the key elements, or you went all in and built feature rich from day one?
Yeah, so we're even more extreme. So not only did we not build feature rich, we didn't even build MVP. The first version was like literally I'd made a deck with like 8 to 10 slides with screenshots, or basically like designs of what I thought the product would be. Because
Yep.
for all intents and purposes, that's all I needed to be able to go and have
Yep.
conversations with
Yep.
customers. I didn't need a live working product. So forget MVP, like the customers who spend a year, or the companies who spend a year making an MVP only to show that to customers later, I've wasted a year because you're never going to get it right.
Mm.
So, I come back every day from having talked to customers and go, oh yeah, like Rebecca, my co-founder, like, I learned this, I learned that, or this is working, or here's a different customer type, or whatever else. And, the way I always explain to people is you're lucky if of the 8 or 10 slides, there's one slide where people are going, that, like, I need that today,
Yeah.
give it to me, no matter the price. Now you have a business. If nobody's reaching across the table and saying that, you don't have a business. Go start from scratch. Like, if they're being faintly nice, or maybe there's something interesting, or I'll introduce you to somebody else, yeah, you don't have a business. And don't go to friends at the beginning. Like, go to
No.
people who are at least like second tier acquaintances who will be honest with you and tell you, do you have that thing where somebody wants to buy it? But yeah, I think yeah, the less you can build at the beginning, the better. And like, we took that approach to an extreme, but then you have to, like, very quickly focus on building that MVP,
Yeah.
the first version of it, and getting in people's hands and iterating from there. And in our industry, where there are competitors that are 20, 30 years old, to get to parity is hard, because even if our underlying infrastructure and the way we approach it is quite different, we still need to be able to check the box and say, yes, we have SMS, yes, we have voice, yes, we have whatever feature. And so it took us 3 years, let's say, to get to parity, maybe even 3.5 years to get to parity with those platforms, because they had 30 years of building things.
Yep. But competing against the big guys has both got its advantages and disadvantages, hasn't it? So they've got the money and the market share,
Yeah.
but they're basically dinosaurs, which is what you saw. So, but let's move on to the next little thing that curious me about what you did with, okay, you showed 8 features and what one or two features were where they almost reach across the desk and say, I want this now.
Well, very early, I think people understood the idea of, like, how do we had a concept called a journey builder, the journey builder to, change what type of calls were happening in text. And, some are going to be branded names, and some are going to come from a, different number, and some are going to have different messaging. Like, people like that concept very early on. And then we had to, at the beginning, like, there wasn't a self-serve interface for customers to do that. So my co-founder and I were the ones, like, building journeys for customers. Like, we could do it on the back end, but there wasn't even a self-serve product for the first, like, year or year and a half, basically, which is funny to think about. And then I'd say more recently, you see the same thing with, AI voice agents, where people are going, yes, I know I need that. Like, the only question is, like, which vendor am I going to use? Like, that's the place you want to be in, where they're in market, they want the thing, and you get the opportunity to demonstrate why you do it in a different way than other vendors in the market. And then the customer can make a decision about what approach they want and whether they think your approach is the best.
Right. So in terms of AI agents, is there any platforms you use? Because basically AI is almost being broken up into very small niches or verticals, aren't they, really? So it's being applied to just a niche. What technology did you choose to actually build your technology on an app? Or is there a range?
Yeah, so we built the end-to-end, sometimes we call it the contact center as a software or the operating system. Like we built a CCaaS platform, which is the core software, whether it's a human or an AI agent that you need to decide, who's making the call or taking the call, what are they saying on it? What happens afterwards? What are next steps? All that stuff. We then built a lot of the capabilities around like how like what the AI agent does, but we are not an LLM provider, right? So we are not in the business of raising millions of dollars to go and try to like optimize an LLM. That's what, Meta and Anthropic and Google and OpenAI are doing. We partner with them. So we have contracts with all those players and our customers can use any of them to, and there's abilities to customize them, obviously, for our specific industries, but that is a big advantage. Like in the same way, like we don't run fiber optic, under the ground to like our customers, we
Yeah.
use the existing fiber players. And our customers sometimes bring LLMs with them. But so we use existing providers for that. What we've really focused on is what are the tools you need to build AI agents, to test AI agents, get them in production, A/B test, see what's working, see what's not, manage them. Those are things that we do very well. And those are things that the LLM providers are not as focused on. They're not making what are the tools for contact centers to use AI agents and movies and whatever other 10 other examples. They're focused on, what is the API endpoint that we offer everybody that they can all use. So I do think there's a lot of opportunity for workflow specific tools. Even within that, we focus on certain industries and certain examples within those industries. So it gets very, when a customer comes in and they're an insurance customer, there's 3 or 4 things that we think AI agents do amazingly well in their use case and we focus on.
Right. So one of the big challenges being raised too now is basically proprietary IP that's basically locked within a company.
Mm.
OpenAI is OpenAI. In other words, it sits in the cloud, you can access it. And so if you share it with the cloud, it becomes everyone's IP. How do you manage that? Because I'm sure some of your clients must be saying, I want to make sure that my IP is not lost, is not given away. How do you do that? Because I think we're realizing now that we need to make sure that, um, with the web, we gave everything away to the web, basically, or most of it. But, that's the easy part. Basically, making it work's the other part. But how do you protect your customers' IP within your industries? And then I'm going to ask you which industries you're focusing on, but that'd be interesting. So number
Yeah,
one, yeah,
took a pretty strong line. So all of our agreements with the LM providers are very clear that they're not allowed to use our customers' data to train their
training.
models.
Okay.
And clear that while during the interaction, we're giving the AI agent a specific piece of information, like where the customer is from, all that gets erased as soon as the interaction is done. They don't store the data in any way. So we are truly just using them as a provider of a like specific service.
Okay.
And that, alleviates a lot of concerns because yeah, customers don't are very worried that their customers' health data or security data or whatever will accidentally end up in the LLM and then like it'd be a bad thing. So yeah, we just took a very strong line. There are some providers that will still, say, hey, we want to use your data to train our models. But honestly, like it's not necessary anymore and it's very expensive. And so that sort of model of working where you use the existing calls to train the models as going out and sort of the new sort of ways like no pre-training. Like we've already done enough with the models to get them in a place where we don't need to pre-train the model specifically to your company.
Right. So the other big question raised, which is sort of comes out of social media's history, is everyone trusted Facebook until they didn't. In other words, Cambridge Analytica is a perfect example of that.
Mhm.
So they're telling you they're erasing the data. Do you think, obviously you're going to have trust about that. So is there any way you can test that?
Yeah, well, so contractually, like their Facebook's contracts were very different because it wasn't a contract with a company. It was a terms of use with an individual, and they changed it so they could use the data. So was Facebook actually violating their terms of use with an end user? I don't know. In this case, we have a contract with a company. So it's company to company. It's very clear. It's a different standard. If they were to violate that, there would be huge lawsuits around it because of that. So there's some legal financial protection. Do we check? Like we can, in most of the contracts, we have the right, like we could go and do an audit and check. But I'd say like we believe that these actors like a Google or a Facebook or whatever are doing the right thing in this area. Like I don't think that like they are trying to go and do the wrong thing. At the very beginning, were they sometimes like scraping YouTube when they probably shouldn't have? Sure. But like they got their hands slapped and now they're like their contracts are much clearer. What are they allowed to use and what are they not allowed to use for training?
Yeah. It is a fascinating area. It's one of trust, and the big boys might go, well, yeah, we're worth $1 trillion. Sue us. But anyway, that's another story. So AI agents, let's go back to that. Generally, so AI agents, tell me if I'm right or wrong here. AI agents are something that actually can come up with an idea, use data, and actually then act on it. So in other words, it's not just information curation, collaboration, distillation. It's
Yeah, but I'd go even beyond that. There have been systems that can act on data for a long time. The
yeah,
difference with the AI agents is the historic systems were deterministic, where you had a rule. You said, when I give you one, you do B. When I give you two, you do Z. It was deterministic, right? And just you had to be really specific with it. Generative AI is not deterministic, it's stochastic, right? If I give it one, it might give me different things, right? And it's like a human. You can teach it that the right answer is B, but it's not always going to just do B. It might say, well, let me think about that. I'm not sure there is an answer. Well, if the answer, it could be A, B, or C, and whatever. It is a different way of approaching the problem. And so I think, there's some worries that come with that of like, what if it gets it wrong? What if the training's bad? What are the legal implications of like, not being deterministic, so on and so forth. But the consequences when you're a human interacting with it, it feels much more natural. Like it's not the IVRs of days past where you'd call in and it would go, press one for this, press two for that. Like, and if you said one syllable wrong, it would go, I didn't understand you, right? The new ones are much better at understanding and much better at comprehending and then having an interactive response with you.
yeah. So what other industries do you think AI agents and AI agents with what you're doing, I suppose, just the start of this change, isn't it, in terms of
Yeah.
and,
There's there's two sort of things happening. One is what are the industries where AI is truly replacing humans, period. And I'd say contact center is one of the best examples for that because it's already been highly analyzed, and we have tons of historic data showing us like when the customer says this, here's what the AI is supposed to do, and very bounded interaction. So that's
very
perfect.
process driven, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the perfect thing for AI agents to do it instead of humans, and allow humans to do other work instead. There's a lot of other industries where the actual interactions that are very valuable require humans, but there are all sorts of things. The humans are so expensive that you don't want them to do the simple things. So take lawyers or take software engineers. A lawyer needs to make judgment calls about whether certain indemnity is okay or not, right? But what they're spending all their time doing is marking up two different documents to see what the differences are and trying to like manage comments. And if they spend an hour on that, it's an hour they can't spend thinking about the actual business implications of that change. So having AI handle all of the markups and call outs and whatever, so that the lawyer can actually think about the more complicated question, save everyone a lot of money, and make sure that they're working on actual important hard problems. Same with computer engineers. Like if an engineer spends an hour looking up some function that they forgot, it's a waste of time when they could just type it into like some system and say, hey, can you remind me, how do I do a date function that does X, Y, and Z? And it just spits out the thing. It may not be good enough for you to just put that in production, but you can certainly use it as a way of improving what you're doing. So I think there are industries that split. Ultimately, I'm optimistic that AI can do more and more of these things that we still think humans are the only ones capable of doing. And most people, most companies, most people who work at companies will be like a giant HR department,
Yeah.
right? And what I mean is they're going to be hiring AI training AI, firing AI, coaching AI, like whether you call that a manager or HR, like that's going to be the function, not just of IT, but of everybody in the company. Like a great software engineer will know how to manage an AI software engineer the same way they might know how to manage a human software engineer today.
Yep. Cool. And contact centers, like you said, are a perfect recipe for that disruption. And have you got any numbers on how many people work in contact centers globally?
Yeah, so there's 16 million people working contact centers. About almost $1 trillion is spent on that labor, versus there's probably 40 billion spent on the software. So much more, many more dollars are spent on the actual labor than on the software.
Yeah. So the other question we talked sort of in my mind, we're thinking about more about inbound, contact center customer service that the AI is going to help you with, which is going to be different answers that, basically helps the human provide the right answer because, AI has got almost a perfect memory. So let's talk a little bit about outbound in terms of outbound sales calls and maybe outbound text marketing. Do you guys get involved with that yet, or is
Yep.
that, yeah? So, and I'm
You
intrigued.
were asking about industries. We work specifically in industries that are higher consideration, high touch. So think of, again, financial services, think of healthcare, local services, education.
Yep.
These are not like buying pencils where you can just return it if you get it wrong. Like you're actually making a decision to go to some university and pay a lot of money, spend a lot of your time trying to, improve yourself. So in those industries, like the communication and the interaction, whether it's with a human or an AI, is so important, and is not going away anytime soon. So like those are the types of use cases we're very focused on, where, yeah, AI is enormously valuable to what's going on.
Are there any rules around outbound calls in the USA regarding, and text messaging? In other words, outbound sales calls and outbound.
Yeah, so it's very strict. So at least, sorry, on the consumer side, it's very strict, right? The consumer needs to give you what's called express written consent. So when they give you the phone number, they have to like check a little box and say you have the right to text and call me from an automated telephone dialing system and so on and so forth. And only then are you allowed to do outbound. What's hysterical, well, less hysterical for me, but I
Yeah.
can appreciate how weird it is on the business side, there's no rules. So because I'm considered a business person, when they get my cell phone on the business side, they cold call me all day long. And, they, even if I tell them not to, and I have no control over whatsoever. So the rules in the United States were built around consumer companies, and there's this gray area in businesses that needs to be fixed and eventually will be, where, you're not going to be allowed to just randomly spam somebody unless you have their permission.
Right. Yeah, we have similar rules here. I think maybe might be a little bit tighter because in Australia than the USA in terms of do not call list, I suppose. But you do have to, if you tell them verbally, I think that's enough, or a text.
Yeah, on the consumer side, it's all very strict in the US. It's just, like I say, on the business side where, I get 1 million calls a day because I run a business, my phone number's out there.
Cool. All right, just maybe a couple of last questions just to wrap it up. But um, what does success look like for Regal.io? And what does success look like for you as well?
Yeah, so it is an important conversation to have with your founder or co-founders at the beginning. We want to make sure like your expectations are aligned and like not, one of you isn't looking for X and the other is looking for Y. So, because remember, the number one reason companies fail is because of co-founder breakup, and maybe the number two reason is running out of money, and then number three is everything else. But co-founder breakup is up there, so be aligned. For the company, we really are out to help our customers. So we track all kinds of metrics around how much our customers are able to use our product to drive better outcomes, save money, drive more revenue, drive more customers. So that's ultimately like why we're in this, is we think it's an interesting industry where we can really have a major impact on the way our customers are actually engaging with their end users. Personally, like, yeah, I think my co-founder and I enjoy the day-to-day work. Like, we want to make sure that like we as a company are moving forward. We think there will be a financial outcome at the end for all the investors and employees involved. And so personally, that's important to us, is that the people who are along the journey with us like are able to get something out of it. But yeah, those are the sorts of things that matter to us. I think, as long as like we continue to serve customers well and innovate and we continue to have fun with like the team, like we're in a good spot.
Cool. One last question. In terms of, as an entrepreneur, you crossed the threshold. It was easy, sort of, in terms of you had enough money, you had, basically a good idea, a disruption of a legacy industry. What are some of the things you learned along the way as an entrepreneur that you could share with our audience? Top two or three, just what's your biggest learnings that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, always, do this with a co-founder. I don't know how people do it all by themselves and like try to do where they're the only person. Like my co-founder and I are 50-50 in everything. We have different parts of the business that we run. We sort of trust each other to make decisions and move more quickly. Wouldn't work otherwise. So that's definitely one. I'd say, two, one of the bigger mistakes, and it's funny, like we always prided ourselves on hiring, but there were times where hiring was hard and we couldn't find the right people. And we ultimately settled for certain, hires. And it always, always, always bit us. Never settle. You just don't do it. Just like continue to slow down or continue to not do the new thing. Like do not hire the wrong person, because having the wrong person means you're having the wrong culture internally, means you're not having somebody who has the same desires and the same sort of work ethic. And so ultimately it hurts everybody else when that sort of one bad apples in the bunch. So just whatever is your standard on hiring, don't lower it, period. Like figure out how to offer more money, change the role description, whatever it is, but figure out how to get the right quality talent.
How do you know when you've got the right person in front of you?
Yeah, you have to have a bar. So like in every case on our side, it wasn't a question of whether we knew what the bar was. We knew what the bar was. We couldn't find somebody who met the bar, and so we lowered the bar. And
Right.
that's where you get yourselves into trouble. Look, if you don't even know where the bar is, go to a company where you have the opportunity to hire and fire and learn and figure that out. But again, our problem wasn't knowing where the bar was, it was lowering it instead of waiting till we found the right person.
So being patient is very important.
Particularly with hiring. There's many things like you want to be impatient about, but the hiring just kills you, when you have that wrong person in the seat.
And it's not fun firing people, is it?
No, and it's not, even if they leave of their own volition because they understand it's not the right fit. It's just it hurts so much and creates so much delay when you have the wrong person in that seat.
Yeah. So I've got one final question, which is more a personal one. If you had all the money in the world, what would you do every day?
So my co-founder sort of asks me sometimes, or she tells me like, hey, even if like we were to sell this, like you would go back and do it again, wouldn't you, Alex? And it's probably true. Like, yeah, I'd take a month off, 2 months off, whatever. But yeah, I would probably have to go back to an early stage company, either as the founder or as one of the executives. That's just what I like doing, and what I find, engaging. I
Mm.
think like I've always told myself like, yeah, I'd like to go do X, Y, and Z that's not work, but I think in the end I kind of like work.
Well, the right work actually fulfills us as human beings, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, it's also, I think the question I ask myself is what am I most curious about? And then follow that. And then work's no longer work, it's actually play. And that's for me is, so what are you most curious about, Alex?
Yeah, I think right now, like, I'm very interested in AI agents and like how this is going to change the way companies interact with customers, particularly when it comes to voice interaction. So that's obviously a lot of my mind share. There's other areas, outside of that, like I'm very interested in international trade and like how we improve what's going on in sort of manufacturing. I'm very interested in, a lot of the asset light business models that you see out there that are transitioning sort of the way in which we use assets. So instead of like somebody's car sitting around doing nothing for 2 months, maybe that person allows someone else to borrow their car. Like that's actually a better use for everyone. So yeah, there's other business models, and lines that I find interesting, but at the moment, yeah, I'm pretty focused on one.
Well, it sounds like you're making a roaring success of it. And look forward to hearing updates about how things are going. But it sounds like you're actually doing very, very well. And thanks, Alex, for sharing your story and what gets you up in the morning and what keeps you curious during the day. So thank you very much for sharing your stories and your wisdom and experiences. And thank you very much. It's been an absolute blast.
Thank you for having me.